Hello, I've created this presentation to go through the style and mood as well as other key aspects of Ray Bradbury's stylistic choices in The Sound of Thunder. I asked you to go through this work yesterday and I thought it might be helpful for me to go through some of it with you so that you can check that what you have understood is right and to also build and consolidate your learning. So style is how a writer chooses to put all of his features together. In particular, as you saw, the writer's diction, their word choice, really has a huge impact on their style, and this is coupled with their sentence length and how they combine, I guess, a variety of long and short sentences. As you can see in the examples here, Charles Dickens is renowned for really long and I like to call them the slow builder sentence. So you can see here in this example, it was Miss Murdstone's who was arrived, and a gloomy looking lady she was, dark like her brother, whom she greatly resembled in face and voice. And the sentence goes on, and it is a slow builder, and as the sentence unfolds, it flows from one description to another, and it gradually builds the picture in that way. Whereas the simple sentences creates a very different effect. The shorter sentences is quite stop-start. I often refer to that as a staccato. If you play the piano, you might be familiar with that term where it's short and sharp. Let's look at this example here. The sun rose, the air was warm, my coffee was hot, nothing stirred. Nothing breathed except for the lizard. That lizard could outstare a rock. So you can see it feels different, and the pace and the rhythm are very different. Potentially, the effect is not for it to build and for it to accumulate, but you're meant to treat each component separately. So consider how Ray Bradbury uses his sentences. How does he construct his sentences? Does he rely more on simple sentence or complex compound sentences? Does he have variety? Is he quite versatile in his style? Let's look at this example here. This is at the beginning of the story. The sign on the wall seemed to quaver under a film of sliding warm water. Eccles felt his eyelids blink over his stare, and the sign burned in his momentary darkness. Time Safari Inc. Safaris to any year in the past. You name the animal, we'll take you there. You shoot it. One phlegm gathered in Eccles' throat. He swallowed and pushed it down. The muscles around his mouth formed a smile as he put his hand slowly out upon the air, and in that hand waved a check for $10,000 to the man behind the desk. What do you notice here about the way that Ray Bradbury has structured his sentences? Well, firstly, I like to consider which ones are simple and which ones are complex. So when we talk about simple sentences, we're talking about one collection of words that there is a verb in the sentence and there is no joining word, and it's just one basic action. So for example, this first sentence here is an example of a simple sentence. And the next sentence, you can see, is what we would call that compound sentence where it has a joining word. So Eccles felt his eyelids blink over his stare, and then the sun burned in his momentary darkness. And then the sentence continues to read out the sign for us. So we have a combination of simple and compound sentences. Let's continue to the bottom paragraph. Warm phlegm gathered in Eccles' throat. He swallowed and pushed it down. So we have here what we consider a more complex sentence. Hang on, I'm really trying to get this right for you. Getting there. Warm phlegm gathered in Eccles' throat. He swallowed and pushed it down. So with this sentence, it's been separated with that semicolon, warm phlegm gathered in Eccles' throat, but it continues. The sentence hasn't ended. There is a pause there, but it's not a very long one like a full stop. He swallowed and pushed it down. So we have that semicolon combining two clauses together. Warm phlegm gathered in Eccles' throat. That is a simple sentence, but then he's combined it with he swallowed and pushed it down. He's combined that with a compound sentence. And so here, this is an example of a complex sentence because it is a simple sentence here combined with a independent clause, he swallowed and pushed it down. The muscles around his mouth formed a smile as he put his hand slowly out upon the air, and in that hand waved a check for $10,000 to the man behind the desk. So with this sentence, you can see that it's much longer than the previous ones. The muscles around his mouth formed a smile as he put his hand slowly out upon the air. This part of the sentence we can see is a complex sentence because it has the independent clause, the muscle around his mouth formed a smile, and then it's combined with he put his hand slowly out upon the air. So we have the as joining those two phrases together. So we can see that that is in fact that is compound, but because the sentence keeps going, we can see that it becomes a complex sentence. And then we have another join here. And in that hand waved a check for $10,000 to the man behind the desk. So these conjunctions are adding those elements to the sentence together. And so it is building to a action. So it's giving us detail and it's building to this action. But you can see in this example that he's not using really overly long and unwieldy sentences that are slowly building and accumulating. They're pretty simple, they're pretty straightforward, and they're not overly complex. Let's look at another example. Eccles glanced across the vast office at a mass and tangle, a snaking and humming of wires and steel boxes, at an aurora that flickered now orange, now silver, now blue. There was a sound like a gigantic bonfire burning all of time, all the years and all the parchment calendars, all the hours piled high and set aflame. A touch of the hand and this burning would, on the instant, beautifully reverse itself. Eccles remembered the wording in the advertisements to the letter. Out of the chars and ashes, out of dust and coals, like golden salamanders, the old years, the green years might leap. Roses sweet in the air, white hair turn Irish black, wrinkles vanish, all, everything fly back to seed, fly death, rush down to their beginning. Suns rise in the western skies and set in glorious east. Moons eat themselves opposite to the custom, all and everything cupping one in another like Chinese boxes, rabbits into hats, all and everything returning to the fresh death, the seed death, the green death, to the time before the beginning. A touch of a hand might do it, the merest touch of a hand. So obviously, you notice straight away that there is a ridiculously long sentence. That is very different to what we've read previously. So at this point here, and even in these sentence up here in this paragraph, it is much longer. So this is where I see that often Ray Bradbury dips into this style throughout a lot of his stories, where he has, particularly when he's just focusing on the action and the plot development, his sentences aren't overly complex and long. But when he becomes what I see as the philosophical, he allows his sentences to build and develop, and you can see that this part here, it's getting into a point where he's trying to capture and describe this really abstract concept of time, of this really complex, I guess, phenomenon that he's trying to describe. And I feel like often when you're looking at a lot of Ray Bradbury's work, what he's saying is structured in the way to match that. So when he's talking about something like this very philosophical moment, where it's complex, where it can be convoluted, where he's giving a sense through that constant accumulation and building and building and building, that he's building up to a point, and he's conveying something really, I guess, something that is hard to contain, like time. So what he's saying and how he's saying it are matched together. So he's dealing with something really unwieldy like time. He's mimicking the thought processes, this stream of consciousness, and so how he writes that has to reflect that content. I hope that makes sense. So just take note of that when you're looking at a text. Stop and think about how they are putting their sentences together. Pay attention to the punctuation and see the effect of that. Read it out loud and hear how it sounds, and that will give you a really, I guess, insight into what the effect of the syntax is. So when you look at that first sentence up here, Eccles glanced across the vast office at a mass and tangle, a snaking and humming of wires and steel boxes, at an aurora that flickered now orange, now silver, now blue. Here is a perfect example of where he has deliberately removed a lot of the conjunctions. And if you remember, that's called a syndeton. So he could have written, Eccles glanced across the vast office at a mass and tangle, at a snaking and humming of wires and steel boxes, and at an aurora that flickered now orange and now silver and now blue. He could have added in all of these conjunctions, but he doesn't. He removes those, and you can see that it's not, by having those conjunctions removed, you're no longer focusing our minds on the and. By taking the and out, we're now focusing on the action of what's happening. We're focusing, it puts the verb closer, or the nouns closer to that pause after the comma, a snaking and humming, at an aurora that flickered. And you can hear it without the ends. It creates a very different rhythm. Potentially, you could try this in your own writing. Think about if there are sentences where you're wanting to speed things up and almost have the effect that things are happening straight away, immediately, or even one after the other, or even this feeling that things are happening on top of each other, then taking your conjunctions out of your sentences when you're describing these moments can be really effective. Now, this part of the story I found really interesting in how he's used his sentences. Have a look at the number of short sentences here. Eccles smiled palely. Cut that, said Travers sharply. Everyone on his feet. They were ready to leave the machine. The jungle was high and the jungle was broad, and the jungle was the entire world forever and ever. Sounds like music and sounds like flying tents filled the sky, and those were pterodactyls soaring with cavernous grey wings. gigantic bats of delirium and night fever. Eccles balanced on the narrow path, aimed his rifle playfully. "Stop that!" said Travis. "Don't even aim for fun, blast you! If your guns should go off—" Eccles flushed. "Where's our Tyrannosaurus?" Lesperance checked his wristwatch. "Up ahead. We'll bisect his trail in 60 seconds. Look for the red paint. Don't shoot till we give the word. Stay on the path. Stay on the path!" They moved forward in the wind of morning. So what really strikes me is these really short sentences here. Often, you don't need a lot of detail, but you need something. But even when a writer just indicates something and chooses to not give us lots of information, it can actually say a lot more to us. But see how in this situation, the dialogue seems to keep the action unfolding. But it's not overly utilized, because too much dialogue can slow the action down and be quite boring for a lot of readers. So he's separated his dialogue with these short, simple sentences in most cases, and he's also making sure that he's including some description. So see how it's nicely balanced, this scene. And so this gives you another, I guess, example of how Ray Bradbury is structuring his sentences and how he's being really concise in his description and really detailed, but he's not overly writing. He's making sure that every single word in this situation is doing something. It's adding to the story. Okay, I'm just going to stop there, and I might do the next part of this presentation another time. So I hope you found that helpful. Let me know, and I'll see if I can do some more for you.